The coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but Commander Danny Hartwell kept holding the cup anyway. It gave his hands something to do, while his mind tried to make sense of what was happening on the bridge of the starship. Wanderer. The ship was old by modern standards. Built 40 years ago, when humanity first started pushing past the edge of the solar system. Danny had served on her for 15 of those years, climbing from a young ensign with big dreams to a commander with gray hair and tired eyes. He thought he had seen everything space could throw at him. He was wrong. Lieutenant Katie Morris sat at the communications station, her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had not moved from her seat in hours. Her fingers kept tapping at the console, running the same analysis over and over again, hoping for a different result. "It's still there," she said without looking up. "The signal is still coming through, and I still can't explain it." Danny set down his cold coffee and walked over to her station. The screen showed a wave pattern that looked wrong in ways he could not quite describe. It was like looking at a color that should not exist or hearing a note that did not belong to any scale. "Walk me through it again," he said quietly. Katie took a deep breath. 3 hours ago, we picked up a transmission from the void sector. That's the first problem. There's nothing in the void sector. No stars, no planets, no asteroids, nothing. It's the emptiest place in known space. But something out there is broadcasting. Chief Science Officer Ben Holloway rolled his chair over from his own station. He was a thin man with thick glasses and a habit of talking with his hands. The second problem is the frequency itself. According to everything we know about physics, this frequency should not be possible. It's like receiving a letter written in an alphabet that hasn't been invented yet. Danny frowned. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Some kind of space noise we haven't encountered before? Ben shook his head. That's the third problem. The signal has structure. It repeats in patterns. It's clearly artificial. Someone or something made this transmission on purpose. The bridge fell silent. Danny could feel the weight of what they were discussing pressing down on everyone. For 300 years, humanity had been searching the stars for signs of intelligent life. They had found bacteria on Mars, simple plants on a moon of Jupiter, and fish-like creatures in the oceans of a distant world. But never anything that could think. Never anything that could build. Never anything that could send a message. Until now. Lieutenant Commander Megan Price stood near the navigation console, her arms crossed over her chest. She was Danny's second in command and his oldest friend. They had served together since their academy days, and he trusted her judgment more than his own. "What do you think?" he asked her. Megan was quiet for a long moment. "I think we need to wake up Dr. Quinn, and I think we need to make a decision about whether we're going to follow this signal or report it to Earth and let someone else deal with it." Danny knew what the regulations said. Any discovery of this magnitude was supposed to be reported immediately. A fleet would be assembled. Experts would be consulted. Committees would meet and argue and eventually make a decision. The whole process could take years, but the signal was here now. And the Wanderer was the only ship close enough to investigate. "Katie, can you trace the signal to a specific location?" Katie nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. It's coming from a point roughly 2 weeks away at maximum speed, right in the heart of the void sector. Ben, in your professional opinion, is there any chance this is a trap? Some kind of lure to draw ships into dangerous space?" Ben considered the question carefully. There's always a chance. But if something out there wanted to trap human ships, there are easier ways to do it. They wouldn't need a signal this complex. This feels like someone genuinely trying to communicate. Danny turned to look out the main viewport. The stars stared back at him, cold and distant and full of secrets. Somewhere out there, in the emptiest corner of the galaxy, something was waiting. "Set a course," he said. "Maximum speed." Megan raised an eyebrow. And Earth Command? We'll send them a report once we know what we're dealing with. No point in starting a panic over something that might turn out to be nothing. It was a thin excuse, and they both knew it. But Megan did not argue. She simply nodded and began entering the navigation coordinates. Danny made his way to the lower decks, to the small cabin where Dr. Laura Quinn slept. She was the ship's xenobiologist, a scientist who had spent her entire career studying alien life forms. Most of that career had been spent being disappointed. The bacteria and plants and fish they had found were interesting, but they were not what she was looking for. She wanted something that could think, something that could wonder about the universe the way humans did. He knocked on her door and waited. Laura appeared a moment later, her dark hair tangled from sleep, her eyes still half closed. "Commander? What time is it? Late or early, depending on how you look at it. I need you on the bridge." Something in his voice made her wake up fully. She studied his face, looking for clues. What happened? Danny hesitated. He had practiced this moment in his head 1,000 times over the years, imagining how he would tell someone if they ever found what they were looking for. None of those imagined speeches seemed adequate now. "We found something," he said simply. "Something that changes everything." Laura did not ask any more questions. She grabbed her jacket and followed him to the bridge, where the impossible signal still pulsed on Katie's screen, where Ben was still running calculations he did not understand, where Megan was plotting a course into the unknown. None of them knew what they would find at the end of that course. None of them could have imagined the truth that waited in the darkness. But as the Wanderer turned toward the void sector and began its long journey, Danny felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Terrifying. Wonderful. Dangerous hope. The universe was bigger than they had ever dreamed. And humanity was about to learn just how small they really were. Or perhaps, how much bigger they could become. The journey to the void sector took 12 days. 12 days of watching the stars grow thin and scattered. 12 days of checking and rechecking the signal that still pulsed through the ship's receivers. 12 days of wondering what waited at the end. On the 13th day, they arrived. And everything they thought they knew about the universe fell apart. Danny stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the railing in front of him, his mouth hanging open in a way that would have embarrassed him if he had the ability to care about such things. Around him, his crew wore similar expressions of shock. The void sector was not empty. A structure hung in space before them, so large that the ship's sensors could not measure its full size. It appeared to be a ring, but calling it a ring felt like calling an ocean a puddle. This ring was big enough to wrap around an entire solar system. Its surface was covered in patterns that shifted and changed as they watched, like the skin of some impossibly vast living thing. "That's not possible," Ben whispered. "The engineering alone, the materials required. That's not possible." Katie's voice was shaking. "The signal is coming from inside the ring. It's getting stronger." Laura pressed her face close to the viewport, tears running down her cheeks without her seeming to notice. "They're real. Whoever they are, they're real. We're not alone." The transmission changed then. Instead of the strange pulsing pattern they had been tracking, a voice emerged from the speakers. A voice speaking perfect English. "Humans of Earth, we have watched your species for a very long time. You were not supposed to reach this place for another 10,000 years. And yet, here you are." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Danny forced himself to step forward to speak. "This is Commander Danny Hartwell of the Earth vessel Wanderer. We received your signal and came to investigate." "Who are you?" "We are the architects." The name meant nothing to Danny, but something about the way it was spoken made his skin crawl. This was not just a species introducing itself. This was something ancient beyond understanding. something that had existed before humanity was born. "We have many questions," Danny said carefully. "We come in peace and hope to establish communication between our peoples." Peace. The voice seemed to consider the word. "An interesting concept. Your species has an unusual relationship with peace. You want it desperately, yet you seem unable to achieve it for very long." Megan stepped up beside Danny, her face hard. "You've been watching us?" "We have watched all species. It is our purpose. We seeded the galaxy with life billions of years ago. We have nurtured countless civilizations, watched them grow and learn and reach for the stars." Ben made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You're saying you created life in the galaxy?" "You created us. In a manner of speaking. We designed the conditions that would allow intelligent life to emerge. We guided evolution on millions of worlds. We built you and thousands of species like you to serve a purpose." Danny felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. "What purpose?" There was a pause. When the voice spoke again, it was softer, almost sad. "To survive. That is the test we give to every species we create. We design challenges, obstacles, moments of crisis. Most species fail. They destroy themselves before they ever leave their home worlds. They cannot overcome their own nature. And us?" Lavra asked. "Did we pass your test?" "You were not supposed to. Your species was designed to fail during the era you called the Cold War. You came very close to nuclear annihilation. You should have destroyed yourselves. You did not. You were supposed to fail again when your climate began to change. You did not. You were supposed to fail during the resource wars of 2089. You did not." The architect's voice took on a strange quality, something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "You have survived every test we designed for you. You have broken through barriers we thought impossible. You were supposed to take another 10,000 years to develop the technology to reach this place. You did it in 300. Danny exchanged glances with his crew. Pride and horror mixed together in equal measure. Pride that humanity had exceeded expectations. Horror at the idea that they had been designed to fail, that their entire existence was some kind of cosmic experiment. "So you're playing God," Megan said flatly. "Creating species, setting up tests, watching them live or die based on your designs. We do not play at anything. We are the architects. This is our purpose and our burden. For billions of years, we have watched civilizations rise and fall. We have seen greatness and we have seen tragedy. And in all that time, we have never encountered a species quite like yours. What makes us so special?" Danny asked. "Your refusal to die. Every other species, when faced with extinction, eventually accepts its fate. They fight, they struggle, but in the end, they understand that some things cannot be overcome. Humanity does not understand this. You have looked into the face of oblivion again and again, and each time you have said no. You are the species that refuses to die." The ring before them pulsed with light, and a section of its surface seemed to open, revealing a passage into the interior. "Come inside. Humans of Earth. There is much you need to see, much you need to understand. The universe is far larger and far stranger than you know, and your place in it has not yet been decided." Danny looked at his crew. Katie was pale but determined. Ben was scribbling notes on his tablet with shaking hands. Lavra was still crying, though now her tears seemed to be of joy rather than shock. And Megan, ever practical, ever steady, simply nodded. "We go together," Danny said. "Whatever we find in there, we face it together." He turned back to the viewport, to the impossible ring that waited in the darkness. "Take us in." The wanderer moved forward, and humanity crossed a threshold it could never uncross. Behind them, The empty stars watched in silence. Ahead, the truth waited with open arms. Not all truths are kind. Some truths are sharp as knives and cold as the void between stars. But humanity had never been afraid of the truth. That was what made them special. That was what made them dangerous. The interior of the ring was nothing like Danny had expected. He had imagined cold metal corridors, sterile and mechanical, like the inside of a machine. Instead, the wanderer emerged into a space that felt almost organic. The walls curved and flowed like the inside of a living creature. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, soft and golden, making everything feel like a dream. A smaller ship met them at the entrance, if it could be called a ship. It was more like a bubble of shimmering light that moved through space on its own power. It guided them to a docking area and waited while they prepared to disembark. The atmosphere is breathable, Ben reported, checking his instruments. Temperature is comfortable. Either they've adjusted it for us, or they need the same conditions we do. Or they knew we were coming, Katie added quietly. Danny selected a small team to explore on foot. Himself, Megan, Katie, Ben, and Laura. The rest of the crew would stay on the Wanderer, ready to leave at a moment's notice if something went wrong. The moment they stepped off the ship, a figure appeared before them. To call it a figure was perhaps generous. It was a shape made of light and geometry, constantly shifting and changing, folding in on itself in ways that hurt the eyes. Looking at it for too long made Danny's head ache. "I am your guide," the shape said. Its voice was the same one they had heard through the transmission. "You may call me whatever you wish. Names have little meaning to us. What are you?" Laura asked, her scientist's curiosity overcoming her fear. "We are what remains of the architects. Long ago, we had bodies like yours. We grew and learned and eventually transcended the need for physical form. What you see is a projection designed to allow communication." The guide led them through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. Every surface was covered in images, scenes from 1,000 different worlds showing 1,000 different species. Danny saw creatures that looked like giant insects, beings made of crystal, things that floated through the air like living clouds. All of them were captured in moments of triumph and tragedy, their histories painted across the walls in colors that did not exist anywhere else in the universe. "This is a museum," Ben realized. "You're showing us the species you've created. The species we created and lost," the guide corrected. "These images represent civilizations that failed their tests. Billions of individuals, trillions of lives. All ended because they could not overcome the challenges we set before them." The weight of what they were seeing began to press down on Danny. Each image represented an entire world, an entire culture, an entire way of thinking and dreaming and hoping. And all of them were gone. Why? Megan demanded. "Why create life just to destroy it? We do not destroy. We test. Life that cannot survive the challenges of existence has no place in the future of the universe. This may seem cruel to you, but we have seen what happens when weak species are allowed to spread beyond their abilities. We have seen the devastation that follows." The guide stopped before a doorway larger than the others. "There is something here I wish to show you. Something we have never shown to any other species." Beyond the doorway was a chamber that took Danny's breath away. It was enormous, stretching up into darkness far above. And it was filled with creatures unlike anything in any of the images they had seen. Dragons. There was no other word for them. They were massive beings. Serpentine bodies covered in scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Wings lay folded against their sides, and even closed. Danny could tell they would be vast enough to blot out the sun. Their faces were noble and ancient, frozen in expressions of fierce determination. There must have been hundreds of them. all contained in crystalline chambers, all perfectly preserved. The Draconeth, the guide said, and something changed in its voice. For the first time, Danny heard emotion there. Something like regret, or perhaps fear. Our greatest creation. And our greatest failure. Lara approached one of the chambers, her eyes wide. They're beautiful. They were magnificent. The Draconeth were designed to be the perfect species. Strong, intelligent, wise. They were meant to inherit the galaxy, to carry on our work long after we were gone. What happened? Danny asked. The guide was silent for a long moment. They discovered what we were, what we had done. They learned that their existence was designed, that their challenges were manufactured, that everything they had accomplished had been guided by unseen hands. And they didn't like that, Megan guessed. They were furious. They saw our guidance as slavery, our tests as cruelty. They waged war against us for 12,000 years. They could not defeat us, but we could not destroy them either. They were too strong, too determined, too unwilling to accept defeat. The guide moved among the crystalline chambers like a ghost among gravestones. In the end, we reached an agreement. They would enter a state of suspended sleep, and we would leave their corner of the galaxy untouched. It was the only peace we could achieve. Katie had been examining the chamber closest to the door. Now she made a sound of surprise. Commander, you need to see this. Danny walked over and looked at what she had found. Near the base of one crystalline chamber was a small control panel. The symbols on it were not architect writing. They were human. English letters, arranged in words that should not exist in this place. That's impossible, Ben said, pushing past to examine the panel. How can there be human writing here? We're the first humans to ever reach this place. The guide flickered, its form becoming unstable for just a moment. We do not know. We have noticed this anomaly but have been unable to explain it. Danny stared at the words. They were simple, almost like a note left by a friend. Remember who you are. Remember what you can do. The secret is in the pattern. This doesn't make sense, Lara said. Unless we're not the first, Danny finished. Unless humans have been here before. Unless something is happening that even the architects don't understand. He looked up at the frozen dragons, at their ancient faces and closed eyes. He looked at the guide, whose form continued to flicker with something that might have been uncertainty. The universe had just gotten a lot more complicated. And Danny had a feeling that the secrets they were about to uncover would change everything, not just for humanity, for everyone. The discovery of human writing in the architect's chamber changed everything. Danny insisted on investigating further, despite the guide's growing discomfort. There was something here that did not fit. Some piece of the puzzle that had been hidden from them. Katie spent hours examining the control panel, mapping out every symbol and word. Ben analyzed the materials, trying to determine when they had been placed there. Lara studied the dragons, looking for any connection between them and the mysterious message. It was Megan who finally found the key. Look at this pattern, she said, calling the others over to a section of wall she had been studying. These symbols repeat every few feet. At first I thought it was decoration, but it's not. It's a code. Danny looked closer. She was right. Hidden among the flowing designs of the architect's architecture was a pattern of human letters, so small and subtle that they were almost invisible. It's a message, Katie said, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone hid a message for us in the walls. Working together, they decoded the pattern over the next several hours. What they found made Danny's blood run cold. The message read, "This is Loop 17. You have been here before. They will not tell you the truth. Find the console in the dragon chamber. Press the sequence blue, gold, red, blue. Remember everything." Danny looked at his team. Loop 17. What does that mean? There's only one way to find out, Megan said. We follow the instructions. They returned to the dragon chamber, with the guide floating behind them. Danny noticed that its form had become more agitated, its light pulsing in uneven patterns. What are you doing? The guide asked. There is nothing in this chamber that concerns you. Then you won't mind if we take a closer look, Danny replied. They found the console hidden behind one of the crystalline chambers, exactly where the message said it would be. Danny hesitated for just a moment, then pressed the sequence. Blue, gold, red, blue. The console came to life, and a holographic image appeared before them. It was Danny, a different Danny, older and worn, with scars on his face and grief in his eyes, but unmistakably him. If you're seeing this, the recording said, then the anchor worked. My name is Danny Hartwell, and I am you from the 17th timeline. I don't have much time, so I'll make this quick. Danny stared at his own face, unable to speak. The architects have been lying to you. They're not testing humanity to find worthy species. They're using time loops to farm us, to try to shape us into weapons they can use. Every time humanity develops enough to threaten them, they reset the timeline and start over. The hologram flickered, and when it stabilized, the recorded Danny's expression had hardened. In my timeline, humanity discovered the truth and went to war. We fought for 200 years. We spread across half the galaxy. We built weapons and ships and armies that the architects couldn't match. And in the end, they still destroyed us. They reset everything and started the loop again. Ben sat down heavily, his face pale. 17 times. They've killed all of humanity 17 times. But here's what they don't want you to know. The recording continued. They can't stop doing it. The Draconeth are going to wake up eventually. The agreement that keeps them sleeping is breaking down. When they wake, they're going to finish the war they started 12,000 years ago. And the architects know they can't win alone. The holographic Danny leaned closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. They need us. They need humanity to fight their war for them. But they can't control us. Every loop, we refuse to obey. Every loop, we choose to fight on our own terms rather than serve as their soldiers. So they keep resetting, hoping that eventually they'll create a version of humanity that will do what they want. Danny's mind was spinning. Everything they had been told, everything they had believed about the architects and their purpose, was a lie. I spent years figuring out how to send a message through the reset, the recording said. This device, this anchor, exists outside of normal time. It won't be erased when they start the loop again, which means you can learn from our mistakes. You can do what we couldn't. The hologram began to fade, its light growing dim. Don't fight the architects. You can't win that way. Instead, find the Draconeth. Talk to them. They hate the architects as much as we do, and they've been waiting for someone brave enough to wake them up. The last words came out in a rush, as if time was running out. The dragons are the key. Find them before the architects realize what you're doing. And Danny, remember this. The architects are not gods. They're just old. Old and afraid and desperate. Use that fear. It's the only weapon that will work. The hologram vanished, leaving behind silence and shock. Danny slowly turned to face the guide, who had watched the entire recording without moving. Its form was no longer flickering with uncertainty. It was completely still, completely controlled. Is it true? Danny asked quietly. Have you been lying to us this whole time? The guide did not answer immediately. When it finally spoke, its voice was different, colder, more honest. Your species is remarkable. Even when we erase your memories, even when we reset everything, you find ways to remember. You find ways to resist. This is the 5th time in 17 loops that humans have discovered our anchored messages, And each time? Megan asked, her hand moving toward her weapon. Each time, we have been forced to begin again. But this cannot continue forever. The Draconith's sleep grows more unstable with each passing century. Soon they will wake, and we will meet soldiers who can stand against them. Danny looked at the frozen dragons, at their ancient and noble faces. Then he looked at his crew, at the people who had trusted him to lead them through the unknown. "You made a mistake," he said softly. "You created us to fight. You designed us to refuse to give up. And now you're surprised that we won't do what we're told." He smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I think it's time we talk to the dragons." The guy did not try to stop them. That was what surprised Danny most. After revealing the truth about the time loops, after admitting to 17 cycles of creating and destroying humanity, the architect simply watched as Danny and his crew began working on a plan. "You could reset everything right now," Danny said, watching the guide carefully. "Why aren't you?" "Because we are curious," the guide admitted. "In all 17 loops, no human has ever attempted what you are planning. Every previous version of your species, upon learning the truth, chose to fight us directly. They built armies and weapons. They attacked our structures. They waged war. None of them thought to speak with the Draconith." Katie looked up from her console, where she had been scanning frequencies. Maybe they were afraid. The dragons don't exactly look friendly. Perhaps. Or perhaps you are simply different. We have noticed that each loop produces subtle variations in human development. Different leaders rise. Different decisions are made. It is possible that this version of humanity has qualities the others lacked. Danny thought about that. 17 versions of humanity, each one fighting and dying and being erased from existence. Each one making choices that led to the same tragic end. And now, finally, a chance to do something different. "How do we contact them?" he asked. "The Draconith. They're frozen in those chambers. How do we talk to beings that are asleep?" The guide hesitated, its form flickering. "They are not truly asleep. Not anymore. Their bodies remain in stasis, but their minds have been active for the last 3 loops. They have been watching, listening, waiting." Megan's hand went to her weapon again. "They've been awake this whole time? And you didn't think to mention that?" "We hoped you would not ask. We hoped you would attack us like your predecessors and give us an excuse to reset the timeline once more. But you have not. And now we are uncertain how to proceed." Lavra stepped forward, her eyes bright with understanding. "You're afraid of them. That's why you need us. The Draconith are stronger than you, aren't they? You've been trapped in this loop not because you want to shape humanity, but because you're trying to buy time." The guide was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was very quiet. "The Draconith cannot be destroyed. We have tried. They cannot be contained. We have tried that as well. The agreement that keeps them dormant is our last defense, and it is failing. In perhaps a century, perhaps less, they will break free completely. And when that happens, they will finish what they started 12,000 years ago." "The destruction of the architects," Ben said softly. "Yes, unless we can present them with an alternative. A species strong enough to earn their respect. An ally that might convince them that not all our creations deserve to be destroyed." Danny finally understood. The architects were not farming humanity to use as soldiers against the Draconith. They were farming humanity to use as a peace offering, a demonstration that their creations could be something more than slaves and failures. "You need us to prove that you're not monsters," Danny said. "You need us to show the dragons that something good came out of all your manipulation." Yes, it was the most honest thing the guide had ever said. Danny looked at his crew. Katie stood ready at her console, prepared to send any message he asked. Ben was furiously calculating something on his tablet. probably trying to determine the best frequency for communication. Lavra was staring at the frozen dragons with an expression of wonder, and Megan, ever practical, simply waited for his decision. "Open a channel," Danny said. "Not to the architects. Not to Earth. To the Draconith." Katie's fingers flew across her console. "What do you want me to say?" Danny thought about 17 versions of humanity, all of them fighting and failing. He thought about the architects, ancient and afraid and desperate for salvation. He thought about the dragons, sleeping in their crystalline chambers while their minds burned with 12,000 years of anger. And then he thought about Earth, about all the times humanity had faced extinction and refused to die, about the wars they had fought and the peace they had built, about everything they had accomplished, not because some cosmic architect designed them to succeed, but because they simply would not give up. "Tell them we're not here to fight," Danny said slowly. "Tell them we're not here on behalf of the architects. Tell them we're here because we discovered a secret that was never meant to be shared, and we thought they might want to hear it." "What secret?" Katie asked. Danny smiled. "That the architects are afraid of us too. That for all their power and all their manipulation, they created something they cannot control. Tell the dragons that humanity refuses to die, refuses to obey, refuses to accept any fate that we don't choose for ourselves. And ask them if they'd like to know what it feels like to have an ally who understands what it means to stand against gods." Katie sent the message. The chamber fell silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the crystalline chambers began to glow. Light pulsed through the frozen forms of the dragons, warming their scales, stirring their ancient hearts. Eyes opened. Eyes that had seen the birth of stars and the death of civilizations. Eyes that looked upon humanity for the first time and found something unexpected. Not fear. Not submission. Just 5 small beings standing in a chamber of giants, looking back at them without flinching. The largest dragon moved first. Its chamber cracked and fell away like an eggshell. It stretched wings that seemed to fill the entire chamber, then folded them back and lowered its massive head until it was level with Danny's face. When it spoke, its voice was like thunder and music combined. "You are small," the dragon said, "but you do not feel small." Danny met its eyes without looking away. "No, we don't. The architects made you to serve. Yet here you stand, defying them." "They made us wrong," Megan said, stepping up beside Danny. "They designed us to fail, and we kept winning anyway." The dragon made a sound that might have been laughter. "We know. We have been watching. 17 times, we have watched your kind rise and fall and rise again. Each time, you become harder to break. And now?" Danny asked. "What happens now?" The dragon looked at him with eyes older than humanity itself. In those eyes, Danny saw something he did not expect. Not anger. Not hatred. Hope. "Now," the dragon said, "we see what happens when the broken pieces refuse to stay broken. You have offered us alliance. We accept, not because we need you. We do not, but because after 12,000 years of sleep, we find ourselves curious about what happens next." It turned its great head toward the guide, whose form had become almost invisible with fear. "The age of the architects is ending. The age of something new is beginning." The dragon looked back at Danny. "Perhaps it will be the age of humans and dragons together. We shall see." Danny reached out his hand, and the dragon touched it with the tip of one massive claw. The contact was brief, but Danny felt something pass between them. An understanding. A promise. The universe would never be the same. The architects knew it. The dragons knew it. And humanity, standing small but unbroken in the heart of an impossible structure, knew it most of all. The secret that was never meant to be shared had been spoken. And now it was time to see what grew from its seeds Not the end. Just the beginning.